I know you thought I'd forgotten the Psalms. I didn't. You remember the groundwork we laid, that the Psalms are full of comfort and consolation, encouragement, and pointing to God's soon coming kingdom. We have done up to Psalm 8. The last time I recall, I think that was about February, before I really came down not attending because of the foot situation. But here we are, ready for Psalm 9. This psalm has 20 verses, and the sermonette time does not permit for us to go into full detail. All we can do together is get the joy and see the relativity of the psalm to our situation. You have Psalm 119. We couldn't cover that in one sermonette time frame. So with wisdom and with God's inspiration, we will cover the Psalms as we set out to do. Psalm 9. There is a reason why the last Psalm was about I will praise thee, O God. Many years ago, Mr. Armstrong, who was instrumental in the God's Spirit in putting together and formulating the worldwide Church of God, said to his brother, who was very poetic, I'd like you to write some hymns for us, not the songs that the churches of the world sing. Many people said, why are these songs so different? They're different because they're the Psalms. This is what Israel sang on their way up to praise God in Jerusalem. And so we sing the Psalms, and we sing them lustily, and we sing them heartily. You can turn back in your hymnal to page 8 or 9, and you will find the sentiments expressed in those hymns. In those hymns are the same sentiments that Dwight Armstrong utilized under God's direction to give his church meaning and his church something to sing about. I will praise thee, O Lord, with my whole heart. Is there any other way to praise God? Sorry for those of you who's praising God with a sometimes heart. I will praise thee, O God, with my whole heart. In verses 1 and 2 of the psalm, you'll find a mention of the personal pronoun I. They call it the vertical pronoun. And whenever one uses the term I, you got to be careful. Is he going with this? I. You remember the Pharisee and the publican? He went up to the temple. The Pharisee prays thus with himself. I fast, I pray, I this, I give. In the psalm, even though there is a recurrence of that vertical pronoun, it is not used to give praise to the person using it. He is saying, I will praise thee, O my God, with my whole heart. I don't care about the other person in a respectful sense, but I will praise you. I will exhort you. I will show forth your marvelous works. Verse 2, a third set of eyes. I will be glad. You wonder why some Christians are so downcast? Why they're so sad? I will be glad. I will force myself to be glad and rejoice in God. Many a day in that hospital, I said to myself and to my God, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? But God set you aside for a reason. God set you aside for a purpose. And if we in the leadership of the church cannot go through what the laity goes through, how can we empathize? How can we understand? How could we put ourselves in your shoe if we are so elevated that the problems of humanity that do not touch us? We cannot really empathize with the problems that the brethren go through. So he says, I will be glad and rejoice in you. Do you find yourself rejoicing? Or is it hard for you to rejoice? I sat in that hospital with my foot up, couldn't go running, couldn't go walking, I didn't walk for a long time until they sent the people to help me walk, to stand. They were telling us, when you start walking with the walker or the cane, what does the Bible say? That he said the bad go down. So you put your bad foot down first, and the good go up. So you put your good foot up when you're going up. That was quite a lesson. And it shows that people of the world, even though they may not be following God's way, they have a sense as to how things work. The up and down part, you're not sure. The down part is, as they say, going to hell, and the up part is going to heaven. I will be glad and rejoice in thee. I will. Look at the recurrences of the I. But it is not self-adulation. It is not to praise himself, but he's saying, I will sing praise to your name, for thou most high, for thou, O God, art the most high. Verse 3, when my enemies, we all have enemies, are turned back, they shall fall and perish at your presence. Verse 4, for thou hast maintained my right and my cause. We cannot say that God has not maintained our right and our cause. If we be true to God, if we honor God with all we have, God will maintain our right, He will maintain our cause. Thou set us in the throne, thou settest in the throne, that's all English, judges right. Isn't it good to know that God will judge rightly? Human beings are so unfair. Human beings are so unjust. But more than once in the psalm, the psalmist says, you will judge rightly. Verse 5. You have rebuked the heathen. You have destroyed the wicked. They're not all destroyed yet. We know a lot of wicked people. But the thing is, because God judges rightly, He will bring justice and judgment and equity to those who disobey Him. Thou hast, or thou wilt put out their name forever and ever. Verse 6. O thou enemy, destructions are come to a perpetual end. And we know that destruction and evil will end in God's time, when God's government is set up here on the earth. And you have destroyed cities. Their memorial is perished with them. And that is going to be the reward of those who do evil, those who pursue wickedness. They will get their just due in time. But the eternal shall endure forever. That's a stated fact. He hath prepared his throne for judgment, again showing that God is just. God will judge rightly. God will judge equitably. Again, the term judgment is in that verse. And he shall judge the world in righteousness. You remember Acts 17, Paul on Mars Hill, when he says that God will judge the world in righteousness. God is not unjust. God will bring righteous judgment to the world, and mankind will understand what that is once and for all. Judge rightly, he shall minister judgment. Again, the word judgment. Throughout the psalm, the term judgment is used because God is just, and he will bring about judgment and just judgment to an unjust world. He will bring judgment to the people in uprightness. God is not unfair. Sometimes we sit and we see how evil people have such a good time. We who strive to follow God, we are like the set aside ones. But God will bring justice, God will judge rightly, and he will give to the unjust their due. Verse 9. The eternal also the word Lord means eternal. That's why we use that term interchangeably. And if you remember the psalm, the song we sang, the use of the word eternal is prominent through that song, because eternal is one of the addresses to God we can give. The eternal also will be a refuge for the oppressed, a refuge in times of trouble. How many times have we gone to God when we were dealt a wrong hand and found in God a refuge? We found in God a just judge, and he will forever be that. Verse 10, and they that know your name will put their trust in you. For you, Lord, eternal one, has not forsaken them that seek you. God has not forsaken us. Sometimes we feel distressed. Sometimes we feel put upon. Sometimes we feel out of it. But know for sure that God has not forsaken you. He knows where you are. He knew where Jonah was in the fish's belly. He knows where you are. He knew that I was in that hospital saying, look where I am. God's people are worshiping on Sabbath and I'm right there, foot in the air. God didn't forget me. Now here I am standing in his presence, because my trust and my faith were in God. And I knew that he had not forsaken me. Verse 11, sing praises to the eternal which dwell in Zion. We should continually have a song on our lips, a song in our hearts, knowing that God will not forget those who deal rightly and deal justly. Declare among the people his doings. We should always let others know the best we can that God is just. God will bring righteousness to this earth as he has promised he will. Verse 12. When he makes inquisition or inquiry for blood, he remembers them. He forgets not your cry. That was in the hymn also. The cry of the humble. He will not forget. Oh, what did Martin Luther King say? Oh Lord, how long? God will not forget the distressed. God will not forget the downtrodden. God will not forget you. Many times we get the impression that God has forgotten me. I must be a stepchild. No, God has no stepchildren. Did we say last week that God has no grandchildren? He has no stepchildren. You are a child of God, if not by birth, by creation. And God will take care of his creation. Have mercy upon me, O Lord. Consider my trouble, which I suffer of them that hate me. You that lift me up from the gates of death. Even in death, God has not forgotten us. Even in the grave, said Job, you remember me. We tend to think that, well, I think God has forgotten me. Those who preceded us in death, God has not forgotten them. The word said he will lift them up from the gates of death. Verse 14, that I may show forth all your praise in the gates of the daughters of Zion. I will rejoice. Again, that word rejoice. You have no right being in the dumps. You have no right being in the dump heap. You have a lot to rejoice in. I can stand this morning here and give God praise because God does not forget his people. And we as God's people should not forget God. I will rejoice in your salvation. The heathen are sunk down in the pit that they made, in the net which they hid is their own feet, is their own foot taken. That is self-explanatory. The Lord is known by the judgments, there's that word judgment again, which he executes. God is a just God. And the world will come to understand that one day. They think that God has forgotten us out here, but he hasn't. The wicked is prepared in the work of his own hands. Haggai. I have to look that word up. Maybe you should too. It is used very much like the word that follows it, Selah. So, in everything, God knows what he's doing and what he's saying. Verse 17, the wicked, this is a strong evangelical verse, shall be turned into hell, and all the nations that forget God. We're all wicked, brethren. God is our Redeemer. All men shall be turned into the grave. It is not a threat that God is making the wicked shall be turned to hell. All human beings will die. And all the nations that forget God. I'm sure you know that our nation has forgotten God. God is looking. God is seeing. God has, as I said, taken a hands-off position. Because God will arise, as the following verse says, and judge the world in righteousness in the not distant future. For the needy shall not always be forgotten. No. The expectation of the poor shall not perish forever. Arise, here it is. Arise, O Lord, and God will arise in time. We cannot cajole God to act now. God will act when he's ready. God will bring the world to judgment. God will bring the unjust to judgment. But bear this in mind. God is a fair, just God. God will not mete out more terribly pain on those who he punishes. God is a balanced God. Arise, O Lord, let not them prevail. Let the heathen be judged, there's that word judged again, in your sight. Put them in fear, O Lord. Man has got to always be fearful of God. If God is the author of it all, and he will judge rightly, he will bring to justice the unjust, and he will be exalted in the earth. O Lord, that the nations may know, and that is our perpetual prayer, that the nations may know themselves to be but men. Selah. God is in charge, brethren, and God will bring justice and judgment to the earth. God's justice is not ours. How many times have we said, if I were God, I tell you. God will bring his justice and his government to the earth. And we look forward to being a part of that. Thank God for all things.